Hey everyone, it's Michael Fair from BIT here, on another episode of Talking with Tech Leaders here at BIT. Today we're joined by Jonathan McNamee. Jonathan is a tech leader, most recently with Salesforce and previous to that with Student Loans Company as a digital delivery manager setting up their function in Darlington, which is very interesting. Part 2 is all around leadership, what makes a good leader, how to handle conflicts, how to build teams, how to motivate people, how to give feedback, and how to continuously learn and progress yourself forward throughout your career. So really insightful lessons from Jonathan, and always in part 3 we do some personal questions as well. I'm joined today with Jonathan McNamee. Me and Jonathan go way back to his time at Student Loans in 2015. 8 years ago, Jonathan. Welcome to the show.
Long-time listener, first-time caller, as they say. So yeah. It's nice to finally kind of be in a session together again. We've had many calls back in the day, and it's nice to see things going full circle. You keeping well?
No. Yes, keeping well. No, thanks very much for coming on. So obviously in the first part we're going to talk about your career. The second part we're going to do leadership.
Yep. As
our theme, and obviously we'll finish up with some personal questions at the end. So where did it all begin? You went to Dublin City University.
I did. I was in school and I had been looking at my options for what was going ahead, and I always wanted to do some sort of engineering. I come from an engineering background. My dad does machinery for a living and all that goes with it, and I always assumed I'd go down that route, and then kind of computers came in, and I kind of realized I can do a lot of engineering without getting my hands dirty. So the beautiful thing of copy and paste you can't do in the real world. So I thought this is my kind of step up and my ability to kind of do things in my own way. The course in DCU at the time was very well regarded. They, to the extent that their test environments were physical machines they had built themselves down to processors. So you're writing actual machine instructions on them. And it wasn't something I was naturally good at initially. For as many things as I thought I could do, it was literally learning a new language. It took a long while, but eventually in third year it clicked, and all of a sudden I could write software in my sleep. And for better or worse, I've been stuck with that course ever since. So it's been an interesting start, and then I've followed the line of gold ever since to try and work out where best to make a living in the industry. And again, we'll follow that through later on in terms of kind of the work and career aspect of it.
Yeah, no, completely. And it's so funny when you're saying that. You remember sitting in maths, which I was never good at, and you tell yourself that it's not obviously a good thing to do either. But doing puzzles or finding what X is like a kind of equation or something. Yeah. And it's so challenging. Your head's like, I can't get this. And you're so right. Is when it finally does click.
Yeah.
You're like, why was I, why did I find this so hard?
I remember, I think I was in third or fourth year in university, and we had some sort of a thing I needed to write. And I ended up getting the specification of it late in the evening, and I went to bed, came back the next morning, and I wrote it from scratch, verbatim, start to finish, and it ran first time. And I was just like, I got this now. I'm the human compiler. It was lovely.
Yeah.
And
amazing. That's like learning a new language completely. So did you know you kind of wanted to go into computer? Obviously you mentioned your dad, and
yeah.
What was you getting up to? Were you into sci-fi? Were you into tech when you were younger?
I was always into something. Things were never fully broken around our house. Stuff that was considered unrepairable was regularly repaired around our house or repurposed or rebuilt into something else, and that definitely rubbed off on me. So by the time kind of university came, it was kind of a natural progression to kind of go and do this. So it we got ourselves our first PC, as families do. There's always kind of an epoch where people end up with their first computer console or PC, and that was great fun because we learned to play games, and then we learned to hack the games to make them run better or to remove time limits or all the stuff that you do. And there was usually more novelty in getting programs to do things that were never originally designed to do than kind of what they're originally intended for. So that was a good source of entertainment. And then kind of the more I learned, the more we played around and kind of progressed from there.
You actually found gamification yourself with
better or worse. There was probably a good 10 years then where I kind of went off computer games completely because I could see the code of the I was kind of going, I can see what's going on here. Kind of the illusion's shattered. So it's only kind of now that I've had kids myself, so I've started to bring back all the games from when I was kind of in my teenage years, kind of setting up retro games for them. So they've got lots of classic Need for Speed going now.
Awesome.
It's like that. Oh, you can't beat a bit of Need for Speed. Yeah. So gradually introducing to them as the age ratings get more appropriate. But
No, I
it's,
can
yeah,
imagine.
it was good fun. Yeah.
No, awesome. And then finishing up your degree then and going into kind of your first, junior developer role, what was that like? Obviously, it was in Dublin as well. What was the kind
Yeah,
of tech?
it was. It was.
Like
Do you know
then?
what? I was interesting. I applied for the job, and I ended up having what I thought was a really good interview. We ended up
Mm-hmm.
the interview was about 2.5 hours long. It was kind of we ended up chatting a bit like this, shooting the breeze. We ticked off all the boxes early on, and we
Mm-hmm.
talked about problems and all the rest of it. And then I went home for the weekend, kind of university had finished. I was home and kind of radio silence, and kind of my initial kind of jubilation over this thing had gone, God, my parents kind of said, you probably overcooked it. You probably should have
Yeah.
wrapped it up and all this. And I was just like, what's going on here? Anyway, 3 weeks later, the hiring manager comes back off holidays and said, oh, you got the job, by the way. I was just like, don't ever do that again.
3 weeks?
Something like that. He'd gone on holidays for a fortnight and then kind of went to a long finger. I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
it was a long time to stew. But you know what? It all worked out. I did learn a lesson. So one of the things I try to do is take a lesson from anything that's happening at the time. But yeah, I worked there for a year and a half. I was there. It was a publishing house in Dublin. They were a car magazine. And they were making the transition from kind of a print magazine to an online portal. They were kind of an Irish version of the Auto Trader at one stage, so you could look up cars for sale and all that sort of thing. And I was their first .NET developer. So they had a lot of legacy code there and legacy bits, but they wanted to move it forward. So I was like a child in a sweet shop. I was kind of going, right, well, you could do this, you could do that. There's lots of ways of doing this. And one of the first lessons I learned from that job was kind of the willing horse will get the burden. So I was quite happy. I was kind of young, free and single. I was working till 8 o'clock at night. And eventually got to the point where I realized I need to kind of cut back a little bit here because I've been paid the same regardless of how much I do. But everything was kind of a test bed and a new thing, and it was all new. So I enjoyed it. And then over time, I got, we had, I got approached then by another company in Dublin, a startup, to look at developing stuff for them. So I went across there for another year and a half or so, and we're developing recruitment software. And again, it was a new field. We did a lot of really good work kind of back in the early days of kind of recruitment software. And I imagine you deal with this yourself, having to manage hundreds and thousands of CVs, how to search them all adequately. And oh yes, I can see the side. So back 20 years ago, we had this thing that basically it would ingest 1,000 CVs and it would sift through them and it would kind of give you all the bits you needed. So that was a really interesting thing. And then kind of from there, my now wife, she got a job in Teesside University in 2007, 2008, I think. And kind of we went from there. We initially kind of said we'd do long distance, and funny enough, after a couple of months of €500 phone bills and Ryanair every second weekend, we kind of said, no, something's got to give here. So I said, I'll move over, and I arrived over in the north of England just as the recession was the 2008 recession was happening all around. So that was interesting times. And from there, then I took a job working for a digital agency in Newcastle. That was a really interesting place because whereas I'd been doing software engineering before and it was kind of pure back end and it was whatever, this was all about front end and accessibility and design and the customer first and all that.
Customer centric, right?
Customer centric and accessibility and all that. And I remember one of their front end devs took me aside one day and there was like, you can't write software like that in the front end. I said, sure, it works, but somebody who's got a disability, that just doesn't work. Or if you turn off X, Y, and Z in the browser, that just won't appear. And it was one of these things where kind of an absolute light bulb moment went. I was like, right, this is, I never want to leave somebody behind. And that was my mindset anyway, but it was at this point I realized that I had unconsciously not been helping that situation. So I went down the rabbit hole on that, and I kind of very much, they had a team of absolute crackerjack engineers. They were delivering. So one of the projects I worked on there was the TV licensing website.
Right, yeah.
And that was they were taking on big projects, projects. So I remember I ended up writing the payment gateway for the TV licensing. or the interface into the mainframes that were running at the time, and the PDF generation. So I had a reasonably tight involvement with two main parts of the licensing, the generation and the money taking. So
I don't think I don't think any Scottish people like you telling that story. Everyone hates paying the TV license.
Nobody likes paying a TV license, and if you follow the news in Ireland this minute, there's all sorts of fun and games going on about TV licensing in the middle as well. It's an unloved tax that everybody kind of gets stung with at some point or other.
Yeah, so I think we're over it now, aren't we? Hopefully one day.
Hopefully. Yeah, so we'll see. That company then, I worked through a couple of different companies doing bits and pieces. The recession wasn't kind to all these companies. There's a couple of times I got made redundant just by nature of the fact. There was lots of us kind of got the chop at the same time, and I can say it's been one of the good things that's happened to me in my life, and I firmly believe everybody should go through that process at least once, because it teaches you that nobody is irreplaceable, and there are always other opportunities out there. So I kind of one of the things that I'm very much appreciate is kind of like what you have now, but always be aware of what's around you as well. So I very much hearing that. So I kind of worked in a couple of other bits, and then kind of years down the line, my plan as I was kind of living in Darlington and kind of working in Newcastle, my plan was always try and shorten my commute down to home. So I kept having it over the years. And eventually I was working in Darlington town centre at the time we started having kids. And a job came up got advertised in student loans company in Darlington. And that was interesting itself, because first of all, I was aware of what the student loans company was. Being Irish, I didn't have a student loan myself, but I was aware of what it was and all that went with it. But I had a friend of mine who was kind of in the market for a job at the time, and I was looking up, trying to help him out and all the rest. But I kind of spotted this. Like, I didn't realize there was such a thing in town. It's all of a sudden this digital function in Darlington, which wouldn't kind of be known for its digital prowess at the time. And I kind of said, put your name in for this. I said, I'll put my name down as well, and let's see what happens. And long story short, I got the job there. So that was my first foray into management.
That's amazing. Yeah, what a great story.
So you mentioned I'd been working kind of in .NET. I had, and .NET kind of all the way up through to that point. This was a role working, it was his first gig in management, and it was working kind of Linux stack with Java and all that went with it. And I went for this job thinking, well, this is going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting interview experience, if anything, because there's a lot of moving parts here. But I got the job then, and I started working with people to kind of build on this platform and take it from there. And I suppose that was a lovely point for me, because I'd realized at that point that I could separate programming as one person writing code. I could orchestrate as a person leading people to develop bigger things. And that was I'd been offered leadership positions in kind of multiple previous roles before, and I'd always turn them down because I didn't want to be a manager. I didn't want to be that shouty person at the top of the table, kind of demanding things off people, because that was the kind of the idea I'd had of management before that, kind of one of those kind of middle management people. When I got to this point, I kind of felt I'd programmed as much as I could, and I kind of, a lot of the things I was building for people, I always thought if someone was a little bit further up the food chain, they could have better described the requirements, or they could have let me build a bigger thing or a better thing for less energy if I could have done that. So
But was it hard, just to ask, was it hard to kind of, having done software engineering, having to be hands-on with the code for all that time and moving into management, was it difficult? I'm extrinsically rewarded, so I quite like the pat on the back and be like, great job kind of thing. And when you move into management, obviously maybe make a wee bit of that, but you're the one kind of giving it and doing it. Was that quite a big change for you?
It was a big change, but not a hard change. And the reason being, I was blessed by hiring the best team of people that ever has been assembled in a software engineering team. So kind of it was
awesome.
Miracles every day. And you'll hear this all when you go out, you know who you are. But it was one of these things where we could kind of, in broad strokes, we could describe what needed to be done. And the beautiful thing is we had a very flat structure. We designed that from the very start. Anybody could put their hand up and say, this is nonsense, or there's a better way of doing this. And because of that, we ended up writing some amazing software together, and kind of, there was lots of politics to try and fight in the student loans as well to try and get to that point in terms of being allowed to do that. And we'll come to that in a bit. But one of the most interesting things I found in that was at the start, when people would be a little bit shy, or there'd be a big problem and no good solution started, I would purposely say something that was a little bit obtuse, that sounded plausible until you thought about it. And then was absolutely unplausible, but it would give people something to laugh at or to rub against, kind of say, well, that's ridiculous. But now that I'm speaking, I'll actually go ahead and suggest something better. And everybody would kind of chisel a piece of marble until we kind of got something nice out of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best way, like you're saying. I mean, putting ideas out there, and if it feels like a kind of safe environment to do it, people will give ideas and you can have really, really good things happening. But if people are kind of not ridiculed, but if people are kind of like laughed at, or, you know, saying like, oh, what was that you said there, kind of thing, they're not going to come forward with stuff like that at all, are they?
This is it. And I was quite comfortable in the role in terms of, I was quite happy to ridicule myself because I wasn't writing code at this point. I was kind of a bit like now, I'll make ridiculous jokes with the kids at my expense, and they'll laugh because they know where we're going with it. Yeah. And I was just like, the amount of energy that goes into a dad joke to make it kind of funny enough for the kids, but daft enough that you laugh at it. I said, that's a craft itself.
It's a skill. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the whole student loans in Darlington thing was kind of as a result of the Scottish independence referendum. And this may not kind of be broadcast whatever, but I know at the time we're going, we have this 1,000-person facility in Darlington that's processing applications, but all the digital function of this was based in Glasgow. And they're kind of going, we need a digital function in Darlington just in case this whole thing separates. We need to be able to have business as usual, because it was a very real concern at the time. But I think it needs to be modernized anyway, being perfectly honest. So they kind of, whatever that time was, 2015 or so, they kind of bulldozed 50 desks out of this processing center and kind of cleared it out, and kind of they'd hired a couple of developers and people themselves, and they kind of brought myself and another guy in and said, right, you guys are digital delivery managers, fill the place here with people, start delivering projects, start digitizing this. We've got 1,000 people doing work that could be easier, if nothing else, all that goes with it. So
that's so interesting, saying that story. I mean, sorry to interrupt you, but you know, the government's obviously, they're coming to the referendum. We don't think it's going to happen. You know, it's getting closer and closer, and then they're kind of starting to think, right, let's go and do this and make sure we've got a mirror image.
I'm assuming the statute of limitations is gone now, but that was the opinion that kind of I heard at the time. I know that this is where they were going with it, but I think it was a wise move, because you had, as I say, in Darlington, you had the old kind of woolen mills there, and you had 1,000 people in a building and processing applications, and the most, like, you send in your student loans application or checking documents, whatever else. And for a lot of the time, the most advanced tools that people had were spreadsheets, and spreadsheets with 1,000 people working on them just doesn't compute.
And it's probably worth adding in here for people listening that Student Loans Company obviously do all the loans and grants for students across the UK, but is it not like something like 100 million? Is that a year? Is it like it would be the third largest bank in the UK if it was a bank or something?
I forget the exact statistic, but yeah,
something like that,
student loans were bigger than a lot of banks at different points. Absolutely, like it was just, I think it's on the official documents as a significant part of the national debt or something like that. It's a significant amount of money. Yeah. So you've got a lot of well-intended people doing this laborious, backbreaking work, whatever else, and so there were kind of two teams that they were trying to do in Darlington. There was one that was trying to maintain the existing ingestion of new loans and servicing loans. And then my team was then there to try and look at stuff that was there and make it better. Find work and make savings, basically. And that was lovely. That was really nice. Now, the only problem was that I kind of started in this role in Darlington. It's my first gig in management. I'll learn from this other guy about how to manage people, all the rest of it. That person left, and then kind of they had other people. They couldn't backfill the role continuously for a long time. So I was there in Darlington on my own with kind of my own team, and then kind of shepherd management of another team here alongside me. But the interesting thing was the other team that kind of was there was for the big stuff, the kind of the stuff that had a big project code and all the kind of fancy stuff. I was basically left with a kind of a team that I was building at the time, and nobody knew who we were. Nobody kind of really acknowledged that things could be any better in the business, which was interesting in itself. Yeah. So kind of for the first couple of months, kind of I tried reaching out to people looking for X, Y, and Z. Kind of if I didn't have a budget code, I wasn't getting spoken to, or if I was in Darlington, I wasn't getting spoken to, because the whole thing was very Glasgow centric. They weren't used to dealing with people in Darlington. So eventually I kind of said, right, well, kind of I'm not going to I'm not going to sit in my hands and do nothing. I said, that's just not who I am. I'd rather do something than nothing. So I found some problems in the business. I kind of said, that can be automated, whatever else. So I started building stuff with my team. The biggest problem we had then was where to put this stuff, because all the official server capacity was kind of all dotted out for all the big headline projects. So eventually I was like, right, well, I've got people in Darlington that are using kind of network drives and shares, I say, and spreadsheets. I said, can't be any worse than this. So I set up a server with backups under a desk. I took an old Dell box, I stuck it under a desk, and I started serving software, and I started releasing stuff to people. And again, these were teams that had kind of huge workloads and very little tooling to do it. So I kind of picked the easiest, lowest hanging fruit. I said, right, this will make your life easier. And we found success very quickly, where stuff that they were doing, they now had tools to at least reduce the workload, that they were actually able to keep up with the stuff that's coming in. Because the problem that they were having was the waiting times were getting longer and longer, because in order for them to do any decent of a job, it takes a certain amount of time, no matter how much you compress these things. So we started working that through. And that was really rewarding. Really, really rewarding, because you've got people being productive with their job. And the interesting thing as well is kind of initially that because they've heard lots of things before about how things were going to be automated and then not, they initially kind of don't want to give you the time of day, because they're just like, you're a consultant, you'll be gone next week, and it'll just be loads of work for me to fill in some initiative and then whatever. So I learned from that very quickly, learned to deliver early. So from the very first day, this thing had to do something. So we delivered something really small, but functional and robust and secure, and went back to them. And then they kind of went, wow, okay, this is interesting.
There you go.
Now can it do this? So we initially tried to start walking the floor over to these people. They're already sitting half the office away from us. But it took a couple of weeks to build up a bit of rapport with these people. And of course, they were describing what they would like in terms of automating what they were currently doing. But then I kind of realized, I said, let's do this the other way around. So I brought them to sit with my team. And I said, let's stop talking about the way you're doing things now. What is it you're trying to achieve? Because they were describing 15 steps that they've been used to doing because they've been working with a spreadsheet for 20 years, whatever else. And they were describing 19 redundant steps of one thing at the end. I was like, hold on a minute. I said, how about you type in this thing here and I bring it to step 20 in one go? And they kind of looked at me with the egg timer icon on their face, kind of going, is that a thing? I was like, and the more we talked, we got them to that point. And then we realized, hold on a minute, why are we going there? I said, we can go to the end of this process. So we ended up bringing them kind of step 45 or 50. So their workload was dramatically not only reducing, but it was evolving as well, because we're actually able to take a whole load of the nonsense kind of redundant steps out of this, because it had been designed to be done manually. But I think that's something that people get caught up a lot, is kind of they try to replicate the manual thing with computers. And oftentimes you have to think about this in terms of, no, computers like doing these things, but let's put a bit of engineering into it. What's the problem you're trying to solve? Solve the problem, not the process. If you get me.
So it's kind of like you're going to the problem, and they're saying, here's the path that we use. Here's all the kind of bits to it. What you were doing was just speeding up the car, for example, to get to it. And actually you're going, wait now, do we need that road? Can I have here? Exactly. That's great. That's awesome. And did you get some good wins out of it?
I got some very good wins out of it. So some systems that had never been systems before, we ended up kind of with absolute bona fide systems that kind of all worked. A proper microservice-driven architecture. They could log in with their Windows credentials. It was secure for the first time ever, as opposed to the insecure stuff. It was all internal, but it was not. It was just not particularly pretty before. But just when we're talking about multi-step processes, in the role I had before that, I was working for another place in Darlington, and they had this recruitment system, and it was broken, for want of a better word. Hadn't been working right for a while, and I was set in to kind of debug this thing. And it was built with the best one in the world back many years previously. It was all done with batch scripts. So one batch script would take some data out of one system, do its thing, and then an hour later, another batch script would take the output of that. And it took us a couple of days to work our way through it. And it was doing over 13 hours. It was doing something in hourly intervals, hoping that the previous thing would finish and then going to the end. And I think one of these things was going over 61 minutes, and that's why it was failing. It was whatever.
Right, yeah.
So we were kind of looking at this. We're kind of going, this was obviously done with the best tools that are available at the time, but we could do better than this. So as we kind of unpicked this, went through, we started saying, right, well, again, we went to HR. We said, do you want this thing fixed, or do you want to tell us what actually you want? And they kind of told us, we've got this system here, kind of legacy internal system, and we've got the website, the kind of the actual external facing website where people paste in their CVs. I said, they said, this is basically the cycle we want. The 13 steps we don't care about. I was like, right, okay, this gets interesting. So I said, right, I'm going to start from scratch. I said, it'll be quicker to try and fix this thing.
Yeah.
So I said, I will take 13 steps. I will make them one, and I will, again, go further than that. So I started working my way through and kind of following the steps or whatever else. As I go through this, I kind of realized that the 13 steps was actually 26 steps, because this had broken a couple of years previous, and somebody had gone, I know what I'll do to fix this. I'll just copy and paste them onto a new cleaner server. So there was actually 26 steps at some point. Somebody had just basically gone, so yeah. Anyway,
That's amazing.
We pulled this process apart. And the reason this thing was slowing down was the step that was kind of timing out was generating, I kid you not, a 17,000 line XML file from one system and then importing it into the next system on the next step. And suffice to say, that was breaking. So I kind of went and said, right, well, here's the input data that's there. I kind of took a snapshot in time. Here's the input data. Here's the kind of what it's trying to do is generate it out. So I started writing my own little program to do this. Nothing particularly clever or fancy, kind of here's the inputs, here's the outputs. And kind of, I was getting it very close, and I discovered a love then for text comparison tools. I was able to paste, kind of have the expected output on mine. I kept iterating really, really slowly until I worked out what was going on. And eventually I went back to the HR people. I said, right, I've got it down to 6 discrepancies when you kind of take out kind of date times, because the dates were different. But I said, this thing here, I said, the specification that you've given me tells me to do this, but it's only doing that. And they was like, yeah, that's a bug we've had for years. We were hoping somebody had fixed that. So in trying to fix the original, I kind of realized, because I was actually bringing a methodology to this, I was actually able to say, here are 6 things. I was like, yeah, no, there was like, don't butcher your new thing to make it work like the old thing. Fix it. Like keep the good stuff and do it. So they ended up with a much better system. So the place I was working for was a kind of a shared central service between Darlington Borough Council and Stockton Borough Council. And kind of they shared technical resource between the two. So I was kind of developing this for the Stockton side or whatever else, and this was going really well. And no mention of the Darlington website at all, but there was the same systems at the back end. And anyway, this had gone an order of magnitude better than anybody expected, because this was one of these hated systems that nobody liked, whatever else. All of a sudden, this was kind of what I like to call boring software. Kind of, it works so well that nobody cares. It's kind of, it works. It's like the brakes in your car. You know they're going to work when you press the pedal. You don't have to think about it. But I get this phone call then when it started going well. The head of HR rings me, and she says to me, I remember the call. She was just going, so I should have asked this sooner, but how long would it take to make this also work for the Darlington side of the business as well? I said, I've been expecting your call. It's a one-line change. Let me publish it now while we're on the phone.
Oh, yeah.
I had it commented out, and we've been friends for life since. She was very happy and very impressed. So I literally kind of, depending whether it was the Darlington website or the Stockton website, we literally changed the logo.
That is customer service right there. Like, hold on, let me just fix that for you right now.
Yeah. So it was kind of it was a heavy duty system that literally had that flick in it. So it was nice because, again, it was a matter of understanding the requirements. Like if one system needs, of course, the other one was going to need the same requirements, just for different people. So yeah, that was a nice achievement for sure.
That's a great example and a great story to tell. So thanks for sharing that. I mean, when you're talking about these different examples, one at student loans and one with central shared services.
Yeah, well remembered.
You're obviously speaking to the end user, so people have got the problem, and you're then getting that feedback from them. And I'm kind of assuming always a bit of praise as well, which again, like, you know, it's great to get when you're doing this good stuff for them. Do you think that's really important, being a software engineer, to see the kind of outcome? Because I know obviously there's some developers that might never see the end user or get feedback and that kind of stuff.
Whether you're dealing with the end user or not, I think you definitely need to get feedback that what you're doing is worthwhile and correct, because otherwise you don't know what you're doing and you don't know why you're doing it. And there's no impetus to write better software if you don't have somebody on the other end saying, kind of giving you a very basic thumbs up, thumbs down on what's going on. It doesn't have to be external, but you definitely need some feedback from somewhere that what you're doing is worthwhile, for sure. And that could be as simple as metrics, telling you what's going on, or physical people. But it's always nice, as you go back to your earlier point, it's always nice to get a physical pat on the back or kind of an accolade on a phone call. But what do they say? Kind of, if you can't measure, you can't change. So I think if you're working on something and you don't know how to measure your progress on it, then I think you need to stop. You need to kind of think about building in some metrics into it for what are your metrics for success? Because otherwise you go round in circles for sure.
Mm-hmm. Oh, completely. I mean, I've heard examples of like within big FS companies where, they'll come out after 6 months and they'll be like, here you go, it's finished. And the head of digital's like, what is this? That's nothing what we asked for. We thought it was a bit strange what you were wanting and weren't sure how it was going to fit in, but it was just, why didn't you ask? Oh, we just thought, well, better not. Maybe didn't understand it properly or something. And I'm like, checking in. Is this a requirement? What is it called? Benefit realization of the project. Is it going to actually, deliver that outcome for everyone? Or it should be stopped? Yeah.
Absolutely. I think if you don't deliver something early, two things happen. One, the requirements are going to... Scope creep happens because life happens. For as soon as you write code, it starts to rot as far as I'm concerned. And I think you have to get it to customers as soon as possible so that they can actually see whether that thing they asked for, because inevitably somebody who's asking you to write something more than likely isn't a software engineer themselves. They're thinking about that in a different terms to what you are. So they'll be describing that in non-programmatic terms. You need to get feedback to them very quickly that here's what you asked for. And I presume that you've done some work to clarify the requirements up to that point. But 9 times out of 10, you go to a customer with the thing that you've built for them, and they go, right, now that you've built what I've asked for, I've realized that's not what I want anymore. It's given me a rubbing point to kind of say, well, if you can do that, why don't you do X, Y, and Z? And I think if you don't do that early in the process, you end up with buyer's remorse at the end where people kind of go, what have I done here? So absolutely early feedback and make the customer a rock star. Bring them in, literally sit them with your people because they will understand what's involved in asking for that change, whether it's a big change or a small change, because otherwise you end up with this disconnect where kind of the day before somebody will ask you to do some Herculean thing that sounds like a minor thing to them. We're just like, no, that fundamentally changes the architecture of what we built here. But if they come on the journey with you, they'll kind of know whether it's the difference between adding an extra image on a website or fundamentally changing the database structure. That's a really important thing to have right.
Is it important then, I suppose, you make a business analyst that builds a business case, I think most a project manager, but the business analyst is asking these questions and you're obviously, bring the customer into the tech team because they're going to have a different perception than to what the business analyst that maybe has done change management has, because the technical, the code, what maybe things can do that the BA might not know that you can do.
So this is where I say multidisciplinary teams are the only way to go. Everybody can have their specialism, everybody can have their thing that they like to do, but when we really got going in student loans after a couple of years running, we brought the customer in, we sat them down, and the BA asked the questions, the engineers asked the clarifications, and the clarifications, you could see the cogs turning. You kind of go, well, these guys are thinking about that one line change they can make in 6 months' time that opens up a whole lot of other stuff. And this is where it's going on. And again, the testers are part of the conversation as well, because the testers need to know how to test this like customer, but also kind of add their own spin to it. So the nice thing you get as well then is because everybody's working together, everybody has a good feel for what everybody else is looking out for. And I find a lot of stones get unturned early in the process rather than later on, because you have enough clever heads in the room to kind of ask kind of what the right questions are to go with. So that's really important.
Oh, and you're getting it straight from the customer, like you're saying, you're not going to get any degraded information, or kind of whispers come along.
I think a lot of the traditional models of kind of sending somebody off and coming back with kind of chicken scratchings on an A4 pad and turning that into a documentation, all the rest of it. No, bring the customer right in. And again, software is there to make people's lives easier. I think an awful amount of projects now get bogged down by a lot of the theatrics that go with software engineering and the size of the projects. Most projects can be spun up to do something usable very, very quickly and make the customer part of that. Yeah, for sure.
Well, awesome. Really good examples, and thanks for answering those questions. And not to finish off part one, but to move through to where you are now. Obviously, you spent some time with Presto Gifts.
Yes.
Which you co-founded.
I did. I've worked on a couple of different kind of side projects over the years. And around that time in student loans, my wife had an idea on trying to automate the gift problem, because everybody has an anniversary or birthday or something like that. And we have the same problem every year. And I ended up actually taking a sabbatical towards the end of my time in the student loans company to support her in that minding kids, basically, so she could go out and do that thing. And it was a really interesting idea. It's still not a problem that's solved yet. And I know Amazon have tried this 2 or 3 times and they haven't got it done. It's a project we ended up having to park at the end just because between kind of Brexit and all the rest of it, kind of it was the wrong time to try and do that. But the premise is still valid in terms of everybody has half a dozen gifts that they need to buy during the year, and it's a cause of stress for most people, especially if you're on my side of the chromosome list, where you kind of yeah.
It's not easy.
You don't pick up all the subtle cues that kind of that tell you that you should have done this, that. And
I wonder why you kept leaving it open on that page in the magazine. No, you're totally right. You're totally right. But hat off to starting it, because that's the thing people don't do, is that they have the idea, it goes in a notepad, it goes in a post-it, nothing gets done with it. But you've actually, made a bash it. So
we worked at it for quite a while. We built up quite a lot of work, a lot of IP with it, and it may well be something we come back to in the future. One of the things I said, we've done a couple of things together as well in the past. We're a good team, myself and my wife. And what's happened so far is kind of every business idea we start off doesn't necessarily kind of go in the direction we want, as business never does seems to go. But I've had some cracking interviews where I've brought something I've built into an interview and said, here's what I've built. I can adapt that to do something else for you, whatever else. So kind of it's always worked out well in the end, and I may well come back to it in the future. So yeah,
totally.
Interesting times.
Definitely always a positive side to it as well, like you say, is it might be bad news just now that you think, but actually in the future it could be useful and beneficial. So how you look at it,
I think you often see these kind of adages of never give up and all the rest of it. And I think sometimes you have to be pragmatic about kind of when things are working, when they're not working, and kind of say when you need to kind of pause and come back to them at another point in time. So yeah, we made the decision to kind of pause it, and I ended up working for Salesforce then, which was another adventure.
Salesforce.
Yeah.
And you've been there for 3.5 years, almost 4 years now?
3.5 years, yes. I need to update my LinkedIn, actually. I have I finished up with Salesforce in May. I decided to take a year out and travel the world with my family. So I am currently talking to you from sunny California. Literally. It's one of these things where you kind of... As everybody does, the ads come on the television for the holidays or whatever else. Everybody says we should do that sometime, where there's a nice picture of a house on a lake or something like that. And we kind of talked about doing this for years. And then one day I was shown a particularly nice picture on the phone. And I said, why don't we actually go and do this? I said, no, actually do this, because we'd originally talked about kind of maybe trying to retire in our early 50s, working like crazy between now and then going on a nice cruise or going and traveling the world for 6 months, whatever else. And I kind of said, no, I said, we need to do this properly. I said, we always kind of look at doing things a little bit outside the box. Why don't we actually go and do this now? And I said, what are the things that stop us? And the inevitable things of kids in school and jobs and house and mortgage and all the rest. So I said, yeah, but if there was an emergency, you'd move all those things in the morning. I kind of let that conversation hang there. But I said, let's just do this. And Amanda, my wife, agreed. We had this grandiose kind of handshake gesture on the couch. It's kind of awkward when you're sitting together. We said, no, we're actually going to do this. So anyway, the ads kind of faded back in. We kind of went back to watching whatever we're watching and kind of let that sit for a couple of days. Anyway, I went home. I went back to Ireland for a 40th birthday party then. And I came back kind of the following Monday morning, Monday afternoon, and there's an estate agent standing in our kitchen kind of sizing the place up for rental. And I was just like, wow, okay, this is actually happening then.
I love that. That's amazing.
And you know what? It's scary and euphoric in equal measure, and one of the best things we've ever done, for sure.
That's awesome. But now you can say, what you're up to now, I'm just traveling the world with the family.
All the things that you could never say yes to because you've got football practice or you've got work or whatever else. I've just said, so I seen somebody on LinkedIn literally yesterday, basically saying, I'm in San Francisco next week. Shout if you want to meet up. I was like, I can do that. I was just like, I've literally updated my own LinkedIn to do the same. I was like, I'll be in San Francisco next week. Let's meet up, because let's use opportunities. And I firmly believe say yes to opportunity at all times.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So thanks very much for doing this for California, for Cali. That's good. I appreciate it.
It's nice to give back.
Sitting in a partly sun cloudy Stirling in Scotland.
Yeah, we had 19 degrees today, but we had 47 degrees last week when we were driving through the flat. Yeah, the air conditioning was struggling in the car at that point.
Now you leave all the windows up.
Absolutely. Yeah. And sunshades all around. It's like being on the surface of the moon or something.
God, I can imagine it's hot. What would you say then, Jonathan, is the biggest break in your journey? Was there any kind of, particular highlights or something you want to talk about on that?
There's been no kind of major moments in terms of kind of make or break moments, but I've always had this idea of kind of following where things took me and having an open mind to it. So in my first job, I decided to leave there anyway, but then I'd been approached by another company who'd seen some of my work and kind of said, let's do this. And I ended up having a lovely time there working through and again doing that recruitment software. And I think throughout my guiding aim has been to kind of find stuff that interests me, find people that interest me as well. I kind of, my two mantras in life are kind of to be happy and to be learning. And if I don't have both of them, I can skip the learning for a couple of months if I'm happy, but not the other way around. Yeah. So I've worked in jobs where kind of I've had the opportunity to learn and to meet new people. And I've been very lucky. I've kind of worked in startups. I worked in government. I've worked in kind of consulting roles as well, and I've got a very broad range of exposure to a lot of kind of technology, a lot of people. And I say I've career changed. I've gone from .NET development to managing a Java team on the Linux stack, and then doing consulting through Salesforce as well. So it's been very interesting throughout to go through all those different phases and meet people along the way. Because it's always interesting. The more in this conversation today, it's always interesting. Somebody will have an interesting conversation to have, and here we are.
Yeah, well, totally.
Many years later.
Yes, exactly. I remember it well. You gave me a lift home. Not a lift home, sorry, from Darlington. You gave me a lift to the train station after the meeting, which was greatly appreciated. I never forgot that. I think I was struggling to get a taxi.
But it's always the little things. It's always the little. Where we were in Darlington was always a pain to get to from the train station. So yeah, it was one thing to do. And I'd completely forgotten about that till you said it there now. So it's very interesting. And you helped me build some of my team both in Darlington and Scotland, I think, because I was managing teams in two places at different points. We've had many conversations together at different points on trying to get CVs and closing dates and referrals and all that fun stuff. So amazing how things. It's always be nice to people because you'll never know where you see them again.
Always comes around. No, I totally agree with that as well. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Did you have any mentors in your career, and kind of what did they teach you? If there's any you can mention.
I had. In student loans, I had a couple of different mentors. One who took me aside at different stages and kind of said, "You're right in what you try to do, but you're wrong in your approach," and do that. And taught me a lot about just the right way of approaching situations and learning the hierarchy of the business, because there was a many layers of people in the business. And Vicky, it's you. She was able to help me navigate that throughout a lot of my time there, and give me a good kind of sounding board to try and work out ideas when I was trying to navigate kind of the politics of the place to do good things for the business. But oftentimes the business had to be convinced that what you're trying to do was actually for its benefit or needed the budget approval or whatever else. And she worked with me at different stages to just hear me out and to listen. And I think it was a good relationship as well, because I was able to help her in terms of, she had problems kind of, she was running her own department as well, and she had things that she needed to fix. I was like, you know what, leave that one with me. I now have the contacts to do that. But it was quite interesting then, because I used to go up to Glasgow then as part of work, and I used to go on meeting people missions because I was based in Darlington. I couldn't get people to answer the phone to me because I was a nobody. So I used to go to Glasgow, and I used to bring people out to lunch, be it in HR in Glasgow or wherever else. And I used to meet my own kind of teammates in Glasgow who also teams their own. They're just like, you're meeting who? In what building? I says, I've been working here years and I've never met them. I said, well, I make it my business to meet them. So I was coming up, steamrolling past these people. I was going, well, I meet these people because I have to get, and that was the way to get stuff done. I actually, I found that email and phone is all well and good when you have a relationship made, but if you don't have a relationship made, it's very hard. And look at the business you're in as well, of course. You have to actually meet people in person to kind of build that relationship, ask how their kids are, all the stuff is, because people work with people, for sure.
Yeah, you're totally
That's what you
right.
need to do. So, sorry, go on. Sorry.
Sorry, I mean, you're totally right. I mean, people buy from people.
Yeah.
But if people, you build trust through, sharing information about yourself, like kids and family life and personal, stories, people get to know you and make a decision whether they like you or they don't. Hopefully they say they like you. But then from there, obviously, you're building that trust and that relationship and building that internal network like you've done there is, hats off to you. That's one of the best things you can do in a company when you get in,
Well, I think a lot of places, especially the public sector, where kind of people are used to resistance about lots of things, or budgets are tight or whatever else. And oftentimes kind of you say to people, look, I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for anything else. All I'm asking for is a yes to let me try, or tell me the right person to talk to about this or whatever else. And oftentimes the questions that you're asking are an awful lot less intimidating than they think they might be. So that was something I learned very quickly on there. Again, so the student loans was a very good apprenticeship for me in terms of not even management, but leadership and working with people and kind of working your way around, because otherwise I'd have been in Darlington 300 miles away, kind of just going nowhere. So it was nice to work that way.
No, completely.
Sorry, we've deviated far from the original question, but
no, it's good. It's given a really good example again of how to kind of build that internal network and talking about leadership. And I mean, it leads us well into part 2, which is our theme on leadership. Part 2 on leadership, Jonathan. What would you say then are some of the kind of key qualities or traits that would make someone a good, development manager or a good manager in general with a team?
I have a very simple philosophy on this. I think a good leader, a good manager, whatever it is you want to call them, in the traditional management sense, you need somebody to stand over your team when there's kind of a storm coming in from all angles, from above or below or from the coast, whatever else, and then stand behind your team when the praise is coming in, because your team is there to do the work, and you're there to protect them from all the outside influence and all the pain and noise that eventually comes in a business, especially kind of when there's fraught relationships. You're there to solve all that, and you're there to get out of the way when the praise comes in. And the second thing I would say, and one I've learned, is the flatter the structure, the better. Make everybody empowered to kind of question a decision or come up with a better one. And we kind of touched on some of that earlier. I'll quite happily volunteer to be the dumbest person in the room if it forces other people to kind of have better ideas, because everybody has ideas. And often it's the person that goes, this is probably a silly idea, but I'm just like, no, I want to hear that idea, because on multiple occasions, that crazy idea it's short-circuited a whole lot of stuff where we've kind of gone, right, we don't even need to do this project at all. It's just another small bit of this other thing here and we're done. So I think empower everybody to be at the same level. So not just to talk to me, because oftentimes there's an assumption that it's a kind of an open door policy with the manager. I think people need to be empowered to talk to everybody. If my tester wants to go and talk to the customer, they can do it. If my developer wants to talk to the BA or whatever else, they do that. And a lot of companies have those functions and those people, and they interact with each other. But I think when you get a team that just does these things without putting their hand up, kind of not school style, to ask for permission to do these things, then you've got a team that functions as well as the way I used to say, my team works as well when I'm not here as when I am. And that's when you've got a well-oiled machine working for you.
Yeah, it's like bringing neurons are firing at all different locations. You don't have to bring them in to kind of learn and then go away. They're just kind of continually.
But you can't scale something by being at the center of it. So you have to build a team that it'll grow on its own. And yeah, very, very simple. I'm there to facilitate the team being the best team it can. I'm not sitting on a throne in the middle of it. I want to kind of facilitate. I want to be part of the team. I want to enjoy the fun stuff that they do. I want to make sure that as much of the stuff that everybody's doing is fun stuff, and I'm there to bat the noise away.
And is it challenging then? I mean, I think that's a great way to be a manager, and like you're saying, you'll shield them from any impending things that are coming down, make sure that you're safe, they're looked after, and then taking that step back, like you say with the praise. I love that analogy. Can you spot it within different managers quite quickly if you think, right, maybe they're a bit kind of what's the leadership trait called? It's not bureaucratical. What is the word?
It depends on which way you're going with this. I'm not.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking authoritarian.
I've worked with lots of people over the years and I've observed lots of people. I think the first thing you need to do is, before you kind of make a judgment on who the person is or why they're doing things a certain way, you kind of have to observe the environment, kind of what's the people they're dealing with and what's the environment that they're dealing with. And some of the teams I've kind of observed, kind of, you had a lot of different personalities who've been there a long time with kind of very fixed roles and very fixed things. And there was only so much you could change those things. I was very lucky in terms of I got to hire a fresh team into a fresh environment, and I got to set the agenda completely. And I might never get the opportunity as good again as I had there. But I think regardless, if for teams I've inherited, you do it your best to level the playing field to everybody. And kind of the phrase I used to encourage dissent. I used to say to people, if I say something stupid, and I will say something stupid to see if you're listening, I want you to call me out on it. And I think other people definitely may not be kind of secure enough in themselves to be able to say, take me down a notch if you think I'm going off pace here. But I think they should. I think everybody should be empowered to do that. But I think as well, there's an adage in software a lot of the time that kind of you do software and you graduate from being a software engineer to being kind of higher up the food chain in terms of being a manager. That's not necessarily the right path for a lot of people either. I think oftentimes the pay structures reflect that, but I think in a lot of more modern companies now, again, the pay structures are relatively flat. So people are paid, if they're a good software engineer and they want to do that for 40 years of a career, let them do it. I think oftentimes you end up with people in positions because they're waiting for kind of, it's a good role or it's a good wage or it's got a good pension or whatever else, but they're not necessarily there for the right reasons. And again, each to their own, but I think I would rather change that so that I can go back to happy and learning. I have to have both.
Yeah, not completely. No, good. Thanks for answering that. I mean, in terms of the pay now, I mean, yeah, there's software engineers on 6 figures easily, so, and across different places. So yeah, it's either or, leadership, management, or kind of, continuing to kind of principal developer roles.
Yeah.
Is there any specific kind of challenges or obstacles that you kind of face as a development manager?
I had the usual fun and games. I had a couple of difficult conversations with employees, all the usual fun and games of trying to manage underperforming employees and all that goes with it. But again, you work with the system that's there and you do your best to help people, because otherwise it's very easy to kind of get caught up in the difficult parts of management. I try very hard to make sure that people are given as much rope as possible to find what they need themselves to be their best selves.
I mean, how do you balance the technical aspects of a role and then the managerial responsibilities? I suppose student loans had a kind of TDA, but I assume at a more senior level you get involved in, design and still kind of getting involved in technical areas.
I think you have to find the lay of the land in each role. In the student loans, I was lucky because I was able to forge my own path. A lot of the other teams were very much set up in there was already rails in place because they were delivering X, Y, and Z for an academic year or whatever else. But I think there's always room to kind of push boundaries and kind of say, look, there are better ways of doing this. And that comes down to both the person that you are and the people that you're with. You have to be able to kind of say to the people that you're with, I will lead you anywhere you want to go, but if you're not willing to follow me, then there's no point. And that's where you have to kind of work hard on getting the team to a good point where they're bigger than the work that they're doing. Because I think oftentimes, especially in big organizations, people become defined by the job that they're doing. And I think that's a hard thing for people to shake. People to shake. They kind of lose their own identity in the work they're doing. So I like to make sure that the people I'm working with are bigger than the work, because who knows, project could get cancelled in the morning and you need to be able to do something else with a smile on your face as well.
I can imagine that's challenging. You've poured so much yourself into something like a big project, it just turned off.
Yes, but one of the things I strongly believe in, that the only constant in life is change, and that's never more true than in software engineering. So you have to, I went back earlier to, I said I've been made redundant on a couple of occasions. Once after I was kind of, my youngest had just, or my eldest had just been born, and I got made redundant. And I was kind of going, well, there's two ways I can look at this. I can be sad that I've left a job that I was probably done with anyway, or I can have 3 months paternity leave. So I had a new job sorted the next week, and I said, but I'm not starting for 3 months. I've just had a newborn baby, and
that's awesome.
Best 3 months ever.
Yeah.
So
perception and mindset.
it's all perception and mindset. And I think everybody should kind of consider where you are, and no job is bigger than any one person. So remember that in life.
Completely. Have you got an example of a time you've had to make a tough decision as a manager or a dev manager? How do you handle conflicts then, or disagreements within a team? And is a situation where you've kind of successfully resolved a team conflict, maybe one side's kind of pulled to one solution, one's pulled to another?
Well, I have a very simple viewpoint on disagreements on software engineering teams. I always want to be on the winning side. So I will listen to the other person and I will try and work out, have they got a better viewpoint than the one I'm currently on? Because unlike other squabbles in life where it's kind of opinionated, whatever else, when you're doing software development or you're in professional setting, usually if somebody's disagreeing with you on something, there's usually a good reason. And as I say, the only way I'm going to learn is if I kind of take this viewpoint seriously. And sometimes people have kind of traditional arguments for the sake of argument, but oftentimes they have an opinion that kind of you massage the idea out and you kind of go, well, you know what? Neither of us are right, but this idea that came out of the two of us talking about this is the better thing. And that for me allows everybody to be a winner. And like, again, I don't win by shutting other people down. I win by kind of making sure that everybody wins, if that answers the question.
No, it totally does, yeah. I mean, you're totally right. And I think I've seen sometime about people have got an idea and they're kind of disagreeing about something. I need to think about it's actually, they're not saying that you're rubbish or, that's wrong. It's, focus, it's like come together and actually look at the problem rather than facing each other kind of thing.
Well, I always think that if somebody is passionate enough about something to kind of raise their hand and say, I don't like this or whatever else, like if it's personal, like if they say, I don't like you, that's a separate problem and you have to deal with that separately. But most of the pushback that you get in software is, I don't like the approach we're taking to this. I don't like the technology. I don't think the requirement. And that's the sort of thing that you can kind of go, well, that's a matter of working out. I said, basically, one of us is going to learn today, and it's probably going to be both of us, realistically. And that's the simplest way of looking at it, really.
It's like that.
Yeah. Because I'm not going to, you're never paid enough in a work setting to get frustrated or annoyed over stuff like that. So you kind of go, one of us is going to learn today and take it from there, for sure.
No, totally. What about professional development then, and continuous learning? Does it ever stop during your career? What's your kind of recommendations for people listening?
I think it's important when you're working in any role to have an interest in both your role, but probably more importantly, to have an interest in the wider aspect of what's going on. Because you can become so educated as a software engineer down whatever particular rabbit hole that is. Pick a language, pick a technology. You can go to the depths of the thing. In 5 years' time, that'll be out of date, and 5 years' time, people will be using something else, and then you're stuck either doing that role and whatever else. And you may be very happy doing that at the end of time, but it's very easy to become pigeonholed in doing a particular thing. I think it's very important to understand your craft, but understand the crafts of all those around you, because it gives you a much broader sense as to what's going on and other places you may want to develop in the future. So I've gone to lots of conferences on everything from kind of user experience to testing to development, not necessarily in the language I'm in, but because I kind of go, well, this could be something else in the future, because I may not be doing DevOps myself, but I want to know general shapes, how that fits together. Because my view as a manager, the way I kind of do, when I was a software engineer, I was kind of working on the minutiae. I was working on the small thing, make it really small, really perfect. As you kind of move up the food chain a little bit into management, you're kind of orchestrating. So you're kind of saying, this block of work I'm handing to you, I don't want to care what's about the inside of it, but I know enough about how the technology works that I know that within reason, you can put that together for me. I can now think about this other box of stuff here that the tester has to do. I know enough about their thing and do that. So I think it's very useful in life. I almost said wife there. It's very useful in life to kind of have a broad understanding of the technology space that you're in, but also the wider space as well. We probably come to some of that later when we come to the hobbies and interests.
Yeah, no, I think you're definitely switched on with that. I mean, I think as you get a broad understanding, like you say, a holistic view, you look at problems differently as well. Yeah. And you also go off the curve of No, oh, this looks all right. Oh,
Yeah. Well, one of the best lessons I learned, one of the first business I ever set up was a pet website. It was way back when, it was 15 years ago. And it was beautiful. It could do X, Y, and Z. It was optimized with an inch of its life. One of the things I learned very early on was I was struggling with this idea because I was trying to solve all the business problems with technical solutions. And because I had a weak spot on the business side of this, I didn't know how to promote myself. I didn't know how to advertise. I didn't know how to bring people in. I learned a valuable lesson that I was over specialized in one area. And because I was spending hours because I was so specialized, then I was spending hours trying to learn the stuff I wasn't good at, or even whatever, to try and do that out. So I learned from that day forward that learn when you've reached the depth of your ability on something. Learn when to call for help. That's very important. One-man bands or one-woman bands can do an awful lot, but by and large, get 2 or 3 people together and you can do an awful lot more because you can complete a lot of the Venn diagram of skill sets. And that's very important, for sure.
Yeah, asking for help is not failure.
No, it's a strength, for sure.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's important to learn that early on in a career, isn't it? To go and ask the questions. If you don't know as well, don't just sit there not knowing. Go and ask.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, good. So this takes me on to part 3, right? So part 3, some personal kind of quick fire questions for you, Jonathan. Yeah. What drives you?
I think we've covered this a couple of times already. Learning and happiness. I think they're 2 very important things to have in life. I can live without the learning, but I have to be happy, especially if I'm in a role. I need to be happy in order to keep kind of going into work every day. I think if you lose the love for going into a particular place, you need to go. You need to find somewhere else to go and take time out, find out what it is you need to do. And I'm very lucky. I've got 2 boys of 7 and 9, and they keep me energized and out of the laptop as probably wouldn't have been before I was married. So they drive me now. And again, we're traveling the world. So that's driving me now. That's
amazing.
New experiences and all that goes with it, for sure.
That is amazing. What about favourite tech?
So I took a while to come up with an answer for this, but I've kind of settled on the one thing that's always on the table in front of me. It's my little Anchor P2 earbuds, just because they're brilliant. They have a battery that lasts forever. They're very much indestructible unless you put them in the wash after a run, at which point they only have 50% survival rate, but they work. The batteries last forever, unlike other branded earphone products that are available elsewhere. And so, where the battery dies as soon as you buy them.
How do you switch off, or how do you relax after work?
Definitely try and close the screen and get away from it. And I've tried to get better with that over time, because I think life's too short. You need to kind of get out into the world, and oftentimes just read a book. I would love to say I've completely cured my Twitter addiction, but it does still take up some of my time. Still too much things going on in the world, but I think my kids now take me out into the world an awful lot more, which is good. And I'm trying to make sure that I'm a present parent for them and there to spend time with them, for sure.
Yeah, no, good. What about book recommendations, fiction or non-fiction, or you can pick one of each, sub to yourself?
Well, I'm gonna skip the book and go straight for a podcast. Someone I've followed for years, their career, is a guy called David McWilliams, and he's a very interesting guy who currently has a podcast kind of giving his view on the world, kind of through an economic focal point, but realistically it kind of covers everything, because the premise is that everything in economics is human nature. It's kind of the study of human behavior. So he was, if you've ever heard the term Celtic tiger, he was one of the people that came up with that term, in terms of after kind of observing the Asian tiger back in the 80s, in the 2000s, the Celtic tiger was where the Irish economy was going too hot. And he was telling everybody this thing is going to pop at some point, and nobody believed him until they did, and they kind of realized, right, well, you've been saying this for years now. Right. What do we do next? So kind of very interesting foresight into kind of a lot of different things that's going on. So I use that as a good way of learning about both why we are where we are as a society or as a person or whatever, but where things are going. So it's just all around good advice. So definitely worth a subscribe and a listen if you haven't already. So many to choose. I'm assuming that my wife is unavailable for the night, because a night out there would be lovely too. But kind of having a think about this, there are 3 people I'd like, and as I think about them, when I say them out loud, I kind of realize they've all got very similar strengths. So the first one I choose would be Lisa Sue. So she is now the the leader of AMD, the processor company. And she's one of these self-made millionaires, but by being a calm, collected engineer who's kind of never kind of put a foot wrong. She's been kind of a calm, collected influence on an industry that's kind of very tumultuous at times, and just seems like a very interesting person. The second person I pick would be Jacinda Ardern, the former PM of New Zealand. One of these people, again, who just spoke an awful lot of sense. And when you kind of hear about a lot of politicians on our side of the world kind of talking nonsense and getting away with it, she was kind of making some very pragmatic decisions throughout COVID and whatever else.
Yeah,
and just seems like a very open, warm person. And she took maternity leave while taking the top job in our country. And I think that was a really brave thing to do, to kind of set that standard, because everybody's entitled to maternity leave, no matter what job you're doing. And I thought that was really interesting to do. And then kind of after that, I have to go to Vladimir Zelensky. From kind of a comedian to a leader of leaders, what a guy in terms of his ability to take on anybody and give real straight answers to oftentimes very politically laced questions, and not leave his country behind when he was offered a lift out in the first couple of days, when he kind of said, no, we need weapons, not a ride out of here. So I think that the interesting thing about all three people of those for me is they're all inspiring. They're all people who kind of stick to their guns without needing to be flamboyant about it. They're comfortable in their own skins, and they've all got something. They're self-made, and that's really interesting, and they know who they are. So for me, I think I could speak to any one of them for hours, and I imagine all four of us together would have a good chat together.
Yeah, that was some great guests. Yeah, I agree with all of them. And you kind of forget Zelensky, used to be a comedian, and, the early days, like getting that lift, offered that lift out. And I remember him saying that, I need weapons. I'm not going anywhere.
You see, like every so often, like you can see all the political jockeying going on, kind of as different leaders say different things, and he's kind of going, no, I'm calling that for the nonsense it is. Thank you very much. And I think, and I've just done an hour-long conversation with you, but it's very easy to become flustered when somebody's shoving a microphone in your face. And every time I see the man speak, I always think to myself, either you've had more time to think about this than you've had to talk about it, or you're just that good off the bat.
Right away.
Yeah, he knows what he wants, and he's on point for sure.
Totally. So that was Jonathan McNamee, tech leader, currently travelling the world with his family. So I hope he is currently enjoying his travels still. He's been out for the last, I think, 5 or 6 months now. And yeah, I'm sure he's having a great time. As always, if you are looking to have any guests on the show that you'd like to recommend, please do reach out via our website, www.be-it.co.uk, or drop me a message via LinkedIn. Thank you.